Welcome. Um, so last year I did something like this. I went through every book I read, and I said it was either good or just okay. This year, I like to do something a little different. Um, I applied for full-time teaching jobs for the first time this year, and I was rejected for all of them. I didn't even get an interview, but that's okay. That's okay. I still want to assume a professorial air. So, the professor is in. My grading system this year. I'm going to say that a book either passes, which means that I thought it was good. It fails, which means I didn't think it was good, or it passes with distinction. Now, passes with distinction, as you can imagine, is a high honor. It basically is a guarantee. I unconditionally recommend this book. So, yeah, I read many books this year. Some were very short. So short they're barely books, really, more like pamphlets. Some were very long. One was extremely long, actually, In Search of Lost Time, which is like a million words or something. Took me the whole year. I started it on January 1st, and I finished like December 20 something. Well, I obviously read more books than just In Search of Lost Time. So, anyway, all mirth aside, let us begin. And make sure to stay till the end for the bonus round, Castillo's extra credit. I guess I should have written Professor Castillo's extra credit. No, well, I made this PowerPoint like a few weeks ago, and then today I was like, am I going to really record this stupid video? But then I thought I should honor my labor. So I technically read this half of this in December of the previous year, and then in the first week of January I finished it. I'd like to finish my years with a Thomas Bernhard book. I've been doing this for a few years. Actually, this year I didn't. So anyway, concrete, incredible, passes with distinction, no questions asked. Next book, The Famous Magician by Cesar Aira. I've read almost all of Cesar Aira's books in English. This one was fine. It was all right. Yeah, it passes. Sure. I also read The English Understand Wool. You might see that these covers are the same. New Directions published both of them this year by Helen DeWitt. Yeah, it was fine. Yeah, it passes. Sure. One of my reading goals this year is that I wanted to read the works of Sigmund Freud. Why? Well, the previous year, I had to teach Civilization and Its Discontents for a class, and I hadn't read Freud since I was like 20. And as I was reading it, I was like, man, this guy is an amazing writer. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to go through. I took a Freud class when I was in college, and I did do the reading once. So I thought I would redress this grave error. And I don't know why I started with this one. I think it's because I thought the title was like, it sounded like an industrial album or something. It's a very difficult and strange book. There's a great footnote in it about a little kid who throws a toy and he says away every time he throws the toy, and then his mom would retrieve it, and then Freud says his mother died of like tuberculosis a year later, and at the funeral the kid looked at her casket and said away. I thought that was really funny. Yeah, it passes, sure. Horror Vacui by Shai Watson. It passes, certainly. The Notebooks of Malta Lourdes, what a weird title, by Rainer Maria Rilke. I read the Norton translation, and I did not finish it. By all accounts, I thought this book would be something that I would love, and I hated it. I got like 60 pages in, and I just said, no, thank you. I don't. So it fails. Sorry, Rilke. Indelicacy by Amina Kane. Yeah, it was good. Good book. It passes. Poor Fridge by Mark Francis Johnson, who is a poet here in Philadelphia. Mark is a great poet, and I like this book quite a lot. It passes for me, certainly. Pecoet. I think it's supposed to be unpronounceable, by the poet David Melnick. It passes. In Search of Lost Time, Swan's Way by Marcel Proust. I read the Penguin translation for all of them. I didn't do the Moncrief. The first 50 pages of this book are utterly sublime. I would just reread it. I could reread it. It's great. If you're thinking about reading Proust and you're not on the fence, just read those first 50 pages. And if you like them, then keep going. I will admit that the Swan in Love section dragged a little bit for me. I don't think jealousy is a very interesting emotion. But anyway, it of course passes with distinction. Dot by Ron Padgett. I love Ron Padgett. I think this is his most recent book. It certainly has a kind of late style kind of feel to it, very loose and perhaps a bit ramshackle. It passes, sure. Great work. Skyland by Andrew Durbin. I'm sorry to Andrew and to his friends, but I did not really see what was going on in this book. It therefore failed for me. I had an interesting premise, but it just didn't move beyond the premise. That's okay. They can't all be good. I Boombox by Robert Gluck. For a long time I thought it was Glick and then Gluck, and then I recently found out from a friend who knows him that it's Gluck. I Boombox. I can't say I loved it, but I'm more of a Robert Gluck prose fan than a Robert Gluck poetry fan. That said, it certainly passes. The Fern Rose Bibliography by Tan Lin. This came out in that cookie box thing. I thought it was phenomenal. Tan Lin is one of my favorite contemporary writers, certainly. And I thought it was just beautiful. Apparently he is working on or just finished a novel. I don't know. Looking forward to it. But the Fern Rose Bibliography passes with distinction, certainly. The Descent of Alette by Alice Nally. I had to reread this because I was teaching it, and I think this was my third time I read it. I gotta be honest, I disliked it more than ever before. Maybe just because I knew what to expect. It still passes with distinction. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. But I just, its effect was less powerful on me upon my third read. Has something very video game-ish about it, which I like. I appreciate. Franny and Zoe. I read this because, I'm an adjunct instructor, and adjunct instructors get these sort of lowly common offices that are just filled with garbage and dust, sort of a kind of metaphor for our conditions. There is this, in this office that I have at one of my schools, there is like an inch of dust covering all of these books that nobody has touched, or who knows who owns them. One of them is this copy of, I had this old copy of Franny and Zoe, and I said, you know what, I never read this book, so I will. The first 20 pages are really great. It's like this conversation between a young woman and her boyfriend or something, and then the rest of it is awful, like terrible, really bad. It fails. Terrible book. Is Mother Dead by Vigdis Fjorth. Well, if I was rating her name, it would be a passes with distinction, but I'm rating this book, and it's no good. It's way too long for what it does. I read this in a book club that I'm in. We all kind of thought it sucked, and I would say this book fails. Sorry, Vigdis fans. Dora, A Case of Hysteria by Sigmund Freud. I thought this book was incredible. Deeply sad what Freud put this poor woman through, but obviously reflective of, I don't know, gender relations in the early 20th century, at least in Vienna, in the bourgeois society. What's funny is that the introduction to this book is like as long as the book itself, which is really only like 60 pages. And the introduction was wonderful. It's not Philip Reef, somebody else. Oh well, it was great. Good job. Another Mark Francis Johnson book, 800 Jokes. I also thought it was great. It certainly passes. Oars by Troy James Weaver. Another great book. It passes. Also very beautifully made. I tried once more to read the notebooks of Malta Lourdes Brigg because somebody said that the Mitchell translation was much better, and I encountered the same book. I stopped after about 80 pages. I will go back and finish it someday. Maybe it just wasn't the right time. I don't know. But it fails. Sorry. Another Ron Padgett book, this time a memoir about Ted Berrigan. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite books I read this year. It didn't make me like Ted Berrigan more, maybe actually much less, but quite an interesting person. And the book itself was lovely. I think you should write a book about your friend at least once in your life. I don't know which friend I would do it on, but one day I will. Great. Passes with distinction. All Systems Red by Martha Wells. I read this for my book club. I don't really read science fiction at all, and I thought this book was borderline unreadable. It fails. Marjorie Kemp by Robert Gluck. I had to reread it because I was teaching it. It was my second time I read it, and it is phenomenal. Passes with distinction. One curious thing I'll say is that the first version I read was the high risk edition, which is the first edition that was published. The New York Review of Books edition, I think they literally just scanned the original copy. And I suspect that New York Review of Books does this for a lot of their classic reissues, that they just scan it. Well, just retype it. Come on, it can't take that long. But the reason I noticed is that Robert Gluck inserted an extra 2 paragraphs in this edition that are not in the original. And I noticed because the font was different. Like, it looks different typographically than the rest of the book. And I say, what the hell is this? What's going on? And so I have the original edition, and I look, and those 2 paragraphs are not there. He added these 2 paragraphs, which are really kind of inconsequential. I'm a little baffled by it. Nonetheless, great book. Probably one of the best English language novels of like the post-war era or whatever, however academics talk about this shit. The Dead by James Joyce, which I reread. I don't know why. And also, The Dead might be considered a short story more than a novella or a book or whatever, but I'm not a big Joyce guy. That said, this is my favorite thing of his, and that ending, hoo boy, it passes with distinction for me, certainly. Loser. What's going on here? Oh, there we go. Loser by Joseph Kaplan, which I also reread because I was teaching. I love this book. Joseph Kaplan is a poet here in Philadelphia. Yeah, I just think it's phenomenal. It passes with distinction for me. I reread as well the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, another early 20th century classic short work. Even better than I remember it. Just absolutely astounding. I mean, there's I'm not going to say anything about it. It's great. Read it. Passes with distinction. Needless to say. Okay, let's keep going. A Healing Family by Kenzaburo Oe. I read this because Oe died, rest in peace. And I read A Personal Matter when I was like 19, and I loved it. I haven't read it since then. And one of the schools that I teach, the library, had this book, so I got it out, and it's very sweet. It passes. Iggy Horse by Michael Earl Craig. Michael Earl Craig is like a kind of wave poetry guy. Been a fan of his work for a while. This is his worst book. It fails. Sorting Facts by Susan Howe. It's about Chris Marker's movies. Yeah, it's fine. Passes, whatever. The Psychopathology of Everyday Life by Sigmund Freud. Now, this is a book. I liked it. Passes with distinction. I just like that he's like, oh yeah, my friend said this weird thing, and here's like a 10-page explanation for why I think it means whatever. It's a little ridiculous in that sense, but it's fun to watch him think. Yes, passes with distinction. The Moon and the Bonfires by Cesare Pavese, or Cesare Pavese. I don't know how to pronounce Italian names. That's not true, but just this one I don't know. I thought this book sucked. I thought it was terrible. Failed. Awful. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I read this on a recommendation. I would never, this type of thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm sure it's great, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It is astonishing. I mean, I can't tell you how good this book is. It passes with distinction. It's really, I thought it was a book about addiction, but my friend thinks it's a book about aging. I guess it could be many things. Great. Duplex by Catherine Davis. I selected this for my book club, and I thought I was going to love it. I hated it. Failed. Didn't like it at all. The Novelist by Jordan Castro certainly passes. A fine book. Free and Direct by Timothy Boyes or Buse or whatever. I didn't finish it because I could not tell what the hell this fellow was going on about. But it was fine. Yeah, it's good. Good. I'm sure it's useful to somebody. Not me. Thanks by Pablo Cachadian. I reread this because I was on the Book Fight podcast, and you're supposed to select a book. You make the hosts read it, and we talked about it. And this book was very influential to me, and I loved it. I think it's very unique. Passes with distinction, certainly. Awful cover. Dalkey has some of the most bullshit garbage covers out there. I think they're reforming, but they have a history. Earth Angel, a short story collection by Madeline Cash. Yeah, good. I liked it. Passes. The Missing Pieces by Henri Lefebvre. I thought this was a really unique book, really strange. I loved it. Passes with distinction. In a Lonely Place by Dorothy B. Hughes. I taught a detective novel class this summer, and so I had to read these kind of detective novels. Not really my thing, but this book was fine. I still got to watch the movie. Passes. How Fiction Works by James Wood, which I reread. I hadn't read it in 15 years or something. I read it when it came out in 2008 or something. Some useful stuff in it. I liked it. It passes. He obviously really likes Flaubert. In Search of Lost Time in the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. What a mouthful of a title. This is the second volume in Search of Lost Time, and one of my favorites. Obviously, frustrating at moments because it's Proust and it's super fucking long, but it's excellent. It's it's about being a young boy on the beach, looking at all these hot girls and just being like, what's going on? Wonderful subject for a book. It passes with distinction, needless to say. Dime Square by Matthew Gazda. It says I did not finish. I read the title play. I didn't read the other ones. Maybe worth less than the paper it's printed on. Fails. The Memoirs by Caroline Rayner. So Caroline is my publishing mate this year. I published a book myself, Salmon, and Caroline published her book, The Memoirs, at the same time, both through Shabby Dollhouse. And I think for both of our books, I can say we pass. I'm not going to be as audacious as to say that we pass with distinction. We'll let time decide. Cousins by Aurora Venturini. I thought this book was going to be great, really up my alley. I hated it, failed, no thanks. Marcel Proust, A Life by Edmund White. I thought this was a lovely short biography about the life of Proust. It has a strong focus on his gayness, which I suppose Edmund White included or emphasized because previous biographies of Proust maybe don't treat it with as much seriousness as they should. I don't know. But I thought this was wonderful. It made me realize I actually really love reading biographies, and I don't read them that often. So I've been trying to change that. Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, which is another book for that detective. It was fine. Passes. Whatever. Untold Night and Day by Bae Sua, I believe. South Korean contemporary novel. Very strange. Eerie. I enjoyed it. Passes. Certainly. Andrew Weatherhead, the poet, published a PDF of a book called Poems from the Dutch, which I think is an amazing title, on Twitter. And it's gone. I looked for it. It's no longer there. There's no cover. I just put the first poem. I think I know too much about language to have a conversation, which I think is a great poem. It passes. Great job. Leaving the Etosha Station by Ben Lerner, which I reread for the first time since it came out. I don't remember why I reread it, but I was surprised to discover it's better than I remembered. It's really good. It's a really, really wonderful novel. It passes. Maybe it passes with distinction. I haven't been as big of a fan of anything else he's done, but this one is a really great book. Leave Society by Tao Lin. Another book I don't really remember why I read. I did read it. Yeah, it was fine. It passes. Vertigo by W.G. Sable. So I start my first W.G. Sable book I read when I was like 22 or something, and then like every few years I read another one, and this was my last one. It passes with distinction. It's an amazing book. Probably my least favorite of his 4 novels, but that's not really saying much because they're all great, I think. My favorite is The Rings of Saturn, and then The Immigrants, and then Austerlitz, and then this one. There's a great little story about him losing his passport in this book that I liked. I Can See My House From Here by Francisca Matos, which is an unpublished poetry manuscript, which I enjoyed very much. It passes. Tosca by Alina Pliskova, a friend and a poet here in Philadelphia. A wonderful collection. It certainly passes. The Success and Failure of Picasso by John Berger. Somebody posted an excerpt from this book on Twitter, and it really interested me, and so I read it, and I thought it was wonderful. I love John Berger's writing. He's amazing. I've only read Ways of Seeing and this one now. I want to read his novels. What a great thinker. Always a pleasure to read him. Passes. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This book I've recommended maybe like 15 times now to people. Might be my favorite book I read this year. It's a short novella. I won't say much about it. It passes with distinction. There are moments in it that I still think about. A Journey Around My Skull by Frege. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, I liked it. I didn't finish it because I got like halfway through and I was like, I got it. Yeah, fine. Passes. The Uncanny by Sigmund Freud, which is just a collection of some miscellaneous essays. Like there's the one on, the Uncanny. There's one on creative writing and daydreaming, mourning and melancholia. All excellent. Passes with distinction. I love the point that he makes in the creative writing one is that what was it that like listening to somebody else tell a story is like infuriating, and so a writer is successful if they can manage to not make their audience hate them or something like that. It's pretty funny. The Summer Book by Tove Jansson. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to, but I liked it very much. It passes, certainly. Self-Portrait in Green by Marie Nadai. I'm not sure how you pronounce the last name. I really didn't like this. I wanted to. It failed for me. Sorry, fans of Self-Portrait in Green. Seven Samurai Swept Away in a River by Young Moon. I had read one thing of his previously, which I loved. I think he's a great and really kind of wild writer, contemporary Korean writer. I thought it was great. I loved it. Passes. Very. There's one section that I love where he talks about how there is this tree outside of his house that just constantly has pine cones falling from it, and so he would regularly go underneath the tree to be hit by pine cones to sort of feel like he was being reprimanded by nature or something like that. It's very funny. Kappa by Ryonosuke Akutagawa. I read this because I went to a reading in Brooklyn and the translators were reading from it, and I just thought it was so charming, and so I read it, and it was great. And charming indeed. It passes. An Orange by Ted Danson. Certainly passes. Lovely book. Hail by Liza Kotlar. Liza Kotlar. Lovely. It passes. In Search of Lost Time, The Gaimon Way. This one is perhaps a perfect encapsulation of the experience of reading Proust, in that there are two moments in this book. The death of the grandmother is one, and I'm not going to spoil, it happens right at the end of the book, which are some of the most amazing things I've ever read in my life. And they're bookended by these party scenes that are like 150 fucking pages long and are sometimes torture to get through. Wonderful, amazing, passes with distinction. Yeah, I guess, sort of like life. There's some good stuff, bad stuff, blah, blah, blah. Olt by Kenneth Gangemi. Well, this one's fun, a curious book. It certainly passes. I don't remember. I think somebody recommended it to me. Poem Without Suffering by Joseph Kaplan. Passes. I have to say I'm partial to its original title, which was Shoot Kids in the Head. But I guess he thought it was too, juvenile. Maybe it is, but maybe I'm juvenile. The Soft Life by Bridget Talone certainly passes. Lovely collection of poems. Cheap Therapist says You Are Insane by Parker Young. What a fun title and fun collection. I really enjoyed it. Good job, Parker. It passes. Times Square Red, Times Square Blue by Samuel Delany. I've been wanting to read this one for ages, and I don't know. I don't know why I didn't, but I did. It was great. I have to say I'm much more partial to the first half than the second half, which is like more academic and seems a little. I'm not gonna say try hard because that's insulting, but it's just not. It wasn't working for me. The first half though is incredible. Samuel Delany, what a guy. It passes. Jokes and Their Relation to the Unconscious by Sigmund Freud. His great joke book. I liked it. There's a few jokes in there that was funny. His thing about jokes is that you can imagine what he says, right? Yeah, it's fine. Passes. Women Collapse into Better, Brighter Artists. Poetry collection by Iva Moore. Lovely. It certainly passes. Totem and Taboo. Sigmund Freud's racist book about, indigenous and aboriginal peoples and incest or whatever. I admit to have I lost interest about halfway through it. It passes, sure, whatever. I mean, I know it's important to people who study this kind of thing. So who am I to say it doesn't pass? So Much Blue by Percival Everett. I read from my book club, and it was my first Percival Everett book. I really liked it. Thought it was a very enjoyable book. I'd say it passes. Death Egg by Nathaniel Dugan. New collection of, as he calls it, anime poems, and it certainly passes. It's a very fun book. The Pole by J.M. Coetzee, his newest book. I at first thought that it was about a pole, like a stick, but it's about a Polish guy who's a pianist, which is why they got a piano on the cover. Good, sparse, kind of strange. I enjoyed it. Yeah, great. Passes. Great job. Block's World by Emma Catherine Perry. The first book by... oh, shit. I can't believe I'm blanking. I thought I was going to say Good Books Press. Oh, man. They're going to kill me. It's good. It's a great book. I recommend it. It passes. Moses and Monotheism by Sigmund Freud. Wild fucking book. He believes that Moses was Egyptian and argues that monotheism was stolen from ancient Egyptian civilization. It's all very speculative, audacious, I guess you could say. What I think is most curious is that he originally conceived of it as a novel, which is very fun to think about. It's good. Passes. Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession by Janet Malcolm. Astonishing. Incredible. My first book I've read by Janet Malcolm. From first page to last. Just gripping. And she's such a sharp writer. I loved it. Passes with distinction. Can't recommend it enough. Even if you don't care about psychoanalysis. Sweet for Barbara Loden. I gotta say, maybe because I was just coming off the heels of Janet Malcolm, I thought this book was awful. If you like books that are like fragments that just summarize a movie, and then the other fragments are sort of wondering out loud what this book is about, and then other fragments are about how your research doesn't bring anything interesting or new to the subject that you're writing about, then this is a great book for you. Otherwise, you should avoid it. Just watch Wanda. Terrible. Fails. Read Me by Holly Melgard. I thought this was great. A really playful collection of, I suppose you could call, conceptual poetry or post-conceptual poetry. Maybe they're on post by now. I don't know. Great. Loved it. If you're into that kind of thing, I think you would do well to read it. It passes. A Place Beyond Shame by Ed Steck. A very intense book, collection of poems. I would recommend it. It passes. In Search of Lost Time, Sodom and Gomorrah. There's some amazing moments in this one, but this one had the least effect on me, or rather, it just felt a little longer than it needed to be. A little, what's the word? Bloated, much like Charles. It passes the distinction nonetheless. Valentino by Natalia Ginsburg. My first book I've read by Natalia Ginsburg. I thought it was lovely, kind of post-war Italian people, Southern Italian people who are poor and struggling, and yeah, good. Passes. True Grit by Charles Portis. Amazing. It's as good as everybody says. It's labeled a Western. It's not a Western. It's something else. It's its own thing. Incredible. Passes with distinction. One of my favorite narrators of maybe any book I've read. In Search of Lost Time, The Prisoner. This is Proust's thriller book. Really bizarre in some moments. Some sudden deaths that just feel inexplicable, but a wonderful book. Passes with distinction. A Philosophy of Walking by Frederick Gross, something. Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever. I like walking. It seemed like kind of a lazy book. I want to write a book about laziness one day. Oh, it passes. Hot Milk by Deborah Levy. I thought this book was not very good. I had to read it for our book club. Just some real clunky writing. Promising situation in the beginning of the novel. Just don't really feel like it was developed in any meaningful way. It fails. In Search of Lost Time, The Prisoner. This is probably the worst. Oh wait, I have the wrong cover here? Whatever. Yeah, wait, hold on. I think I messed this up? The Prisoner. Oh, I think this is okay. Sorry, this is supposed to be The Fugitive. I just didn't write the the right thing. Yeah, this is the worst of the bunch. Still great. Passes with distinction. I'm getting sick of this. Fudge by another book by Andrew Weatherhead. Great fun. It passes. Great cover. Telegrams of the Soul by Peter Altenberg. I thought I was gonna like this more than I did. Kind of funky short prose by like this kooky guy from Austria in the early 20th century. Kind of up my alley. But yeah, it was good. It passes. Dream Story, another book from early 20th century Austria that inspired Eyes Wide Shut. Incredible. Amazing. Passes with distinction. About Ed by Robert Gluck, his memoir about his former partner, Ed, and about the AIDS years and living in the Bay Area and this period. And it's really an incredible book. Probably, I would say it's the best book published in 2023, at least out of the ones that I read. Incredibly moving and really funny sometimes. I think it took him 20 years to write. So, the best book of 2023. Shadow Train by John Ashbery. This is sort of a more minor Ashbery collection from the early 80s. He's at the end of his triumphant 70s where he released all these books that, won him big awards. And this one's a very short book of short poems, but I still loved it. Passes with distinction. Freud and the Non-European by Edward Said. This was recommended to me, especially because I had just read the Freud book about Moses, which this talk that he gave is about. I thought it was an incredibly provocative book. I would say it passes with distinction. In Search of Lost Time, Time Regained, the last one. He really sticks the landing here. This is, I think, the best book out of all of them. The ending of this book made me disassociate, and I'm typically not somebody that is. I don't like that kind of hyperbole, like, oh, this book, like blah blah blah. It really did. I had a kind of out of body experience when I read it. Unbelievable. Passes with distinction, needless to say. The end of the year now, a surprise hit right at the end. Two Serious Ladies. I selected this for my book club. I thought it was just a sui generis work of art, just unbelievable. The second chapter in particular really stood out to me. Passes with distinction. Okay, and I'm down to the last two. I haven't finished these. I'm taking a seminar on Deleuze's cinema books, which I've heard are his worst books. And, buddy, let me tell you, I think that is probably true because this book is a mess. The class is great, though. I love it. But I think it's like sometimes borderline nonsense. It passes. It still is. And Freud, A Life for a Time by Peter Gay, the Freud biography. I think there's probably more than one, but this is one of the bigger ones. I'm only about a third through it. I wanted to finish it before the end of the year, but then I realized I shouldn't rush it, and so needless to say, it passes with distinction, and it's really a wonderful book. Okay, now it's time for Castillo's extra credit. Surely you want to know my Proust ranking, don't you? I know you were itching to find out. Yes, well, here it is. The first book, my favorite book, as I mentioned previously, is Time Regained, the last one. Unbelievable. Second favorite is the second volume, In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flowers, or in Flower. The third one, The Gourmand Way. Great, yeah. Fourth is Swan's Way. Fifth is The Prisoner. Sixth, Sodom and Gomorrah. And the last one is The Fugitive. Yeah, well, there you go. This doesn't matter, right? Who cares? What otherwise were my favorite books I read this year? Well, maybe you want to know. The Fern Rose Bibliography by Tan Lin. Ted, A Personal Memoir of Ted Berrigan by Ron Padgett. The Psychopathology of Everyday Life. Sigmund Freud. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll. The Missing Piece. Marcel Proust, A Life, Edmund White. A Month in the Country. Psychoanalysis. True Grit. Dream Story. About it. Two Serious Ladies. Yep, that's it. Those are my favorite books. Great. So, my two projects this year was I read Freud and I read Proust. So let's cover the first one. What did I learn from reading all that Freud? Life, friends, is not what it seems. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. The professor is retiring. Maybe I should find a different profession. Indeed. I don't know. Until next year. Thanks. How do I stop this recording?